You're listening to The White Rabbit, conversations on the art of presenting in a rather noisy world. Your hosts are Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. Matt helps leaders of international companies speak, write, and present with confidence. Alper is an author, communications trainer, and a startup investor with a diverse portfolio of companies in Barcelona. If you like this podcast, please share with your friends and colleagues. Now, on to Matt and Alper for today's conversation.
Hi, this is Matt.
This is Alper.
And what are we going to do today, Alper?
Matt, today I'm going to question you about the first three questions that I always hear you talk about. I think they're fantastic questions, and you made a comment the other day that they are obvious, but it doesn't mean that they're utilized all the time. So I want to pick your brain on what those questions are and why you think they're important.
Yeah, so in just a few minutes, I'll outline what those questions are. But you're correct that they are completely obvious and everyone knows them, or at least they think they know them. And the thing is that very few people do them. And so knowing them makes you average. It makes you just like everybody else. Doing them makes you a pro. It's like, I think about free throws in basketball. And pros spend, hour after hour practicing free throws. And free throws are like the most basic thing in basketball. So you see a pro and he's probably had free throws nailed since he was, 6 years old. And you'd think that he'd spend all this time.
Yeah, they seem to come very natural.
Yeah, you think that, okay, here's this pro. He must spend all this time practicing the fancy stuff, like fancy layups. And it's true that I'm sure, practices his layups too. But he also spends hours practicing free throws. It's like free throws are the most basic things ever, but he practices them. And that's why he's a pro, because he doesn't know free throws, he does them. And these three questions are like that.
Okay. Tell me more. Tell me what the questions are.
Okay. So the first question is, who am I talking to? And it sounds like a pretty obvious question.
Yeah, the answer to that seems pretty obvious. Yeah.
Well, the purpose of asking this question, who am I talking to, is to focus your presentation. Because in order to answer this question well, you're going to need to define your end goal. Maybe when you're answering this question, who am I talking to? Maybe when you're answering that question, maybe your project, or maybe your presentation is to present a project. And in order to get this project done, you need to get board approval. So you need to get board approval at the beginning. Okay. So maybe in this presentation,
I'm presenting to the board.
No.
Is that the case?
The thing is, you're not presenting to the board. Maybe you're presenting to your fellow department members. And there are only 4 members. 4 members actually from the board. Maybe the board is 10 people, and you're not even going to be in the boardroom when this decision is made. So what you need to do is you need to equip these 4 board members to go back into the boardroom and argue your case for you, because you won't be there to argue it for yourself. It's really hard to focus your presentation on a group of 10 or 20 or 50 people or whatever you've got for your presentation. What you need to do is make it as specific as possible. And in this example, we're going to we're going to focus on 4 people in particular, these 4 board members. Let's borrow some names from the TV show Friends. Let's say that one of the board members is named Chandler.
Oh, my favorite.
And then there's Monica and Phoebe, and the 4th board member is Ross. Okay, so let's say that this board member Chandler, really likes graphs and numbers. He explains his world in graphs and numbers. He sees the world in graphs and numbers. You need to give him graphs and numbers so that when he goes into the boardroom, he knows what to do. Because you're basically equipping him to do your job for you, to persuade the board to approve your project. And let's say that 2 of these other board members, Monica and Phoebe, let's say that they're wordsmiths. So they like really well-crafted words. So you need a phrase, let's say that they really like catchphrases. They really like catchphrases. So you need to give them, let's say, a 6-word phrase that explains why the board should approve your project. And Ross, I don't know,
Okay.
we would do the same process as Ross. But okay, so now you know that your presentation, because you've dived into this question, you know that your presentation needs some graphs and numbers because you need to equip Chandler. And you know that you need to come up with a catchphrase because you need to equip Monica and Phoebe to go into the boardroom too.
So we're basically talking about empowering the people who have a role in carrying on the message to other people, for example.
Exactly.
Giving them the tools to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You are not going to be there to accomplish what you need to accomplish. Then yes, your job in your presentation is to equip other people to do your work for you.
Okay. And going from the same example, if I happen to be presenting to the board itself and I just want them to see things from my perspective and act on it, for example, is this question still relevant in that situation?
It's still relevant. The application will be completely different, but you still need to ask, who am I talking to? Because now if you're presenting to the board, you're presenting to 10 people. And we've already talked about, the way that Chandler sees the world and the way that Monica and Phoebe sees the world. And so we know that the presentation is going to need to have tools for them, but there are, 7 other members of the board, and you're going to need them to support you too. So yeah, you're going to need to know what appeals to these 7 other members of the board.
Okay, so during my preparation, when I have a date to present to a group of people, it's not enough to say, well, I'm just presenting to the department or I'm presenting to the board. I need to dig deeper and find answers.
Correct. The second question is, well, what do I want them to do? What action do I want them to take after the presentation? And it seems like a totally obvious question. Like, maybe the answer should be, well, I want them to listen to me, or, I want them to change the world, or whatever. The surprising thing is that, I've been doing presentation training for a long time. And when I ask people this question, what do you want them to do? Surprisingly, often people don't know the answer. It's amazing. They're preparing a presentation, but they don't know what they want people to do, or at least they're not able to articulate it. And one of the reasons that you ask this question is that you want to avoid scope creep or presentation creep. In presentation creep, you've got this one presentation, and then you add something else to it, and then you add something else to it, and add something else to it, and you think, oh, this other thing is important too. And pretty soon, you have a presentation that lasts, 4 hours, and it's got 9 million slides, and it's a huge monster. So you ask this question in order to focus your preparation and only put in the presentation what answers this question. What do I want them to do? And so this question kind of ties back to the first question, which was, who am I talking to? Because, what do I want them to do in our example? In our example, we want these 4 people, these 4 board members, to go back into the boardroom and argue the case for me, because I won't be there to argue it for myself. That's what we want them to do. And the third question is, why should they care? Why should they care?
And that's a good one. I like this one.
Why should they care? And you've got to deal with this one because you need to know how to hook your audience. Because remember, in our example, we're trying to persuade 4 board members to go back into the boardroom and argue our case for us. That's what we're trying to accomplish. And if Chandler doesn't care about my presentation, he's not going to do that. Or if Phoebe and Monica, not about my presentation, if Chandler doesn't care about my project, he's not going to argue for it in front of the board. Same goes for Monica and Phoebe. So I've got to find some ways to hook them. And the ways that you hook somebody, the ways that you hook Chandler might be completely different than the ways that you hook Monica. And the way that you hook Monica might be completely different from the way that you hook Phoebe. So you've got to ask this question, why should they care? if Chandler just sits there and checks his phone and he doesn't care about what you're saying, he's just checking his phone. There's no way, if he doesn't care about your project or he doesn't care about what you're saying, there is no way, even if you have an infinite number of charts and numbers, things that he would love, if he doesn't care about your project, he's not going to go into the boardroom and argue your case for you. The same goes for Monica and Phoebe.
So I need to dig deep into this question and find out how and why they should care, each one of them.
Yeah, there's a great quote from, I think it was Albert Einstein. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes understanding the problem and 5 minutes solving the problem. If you have an hour to prepare your presentation or 10 minutes to prepare your presentation or 6 months to prepare, whatever amount of time you have to prepare your presentation, spend most of it answering these 3 questions and the rest of it will fall into place.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up, I love these questions and thank you for the insight. And at this point, I would like to ask you regarding our listeners, not the entire question, not all of them, but I would like to ask the third question from their perspective. Why should they care about these first three questions?
Why should they care about these 3 questions? Because you don't want to waste your time. I've got a million other things to do. At work, I've got a million other things to do. At home, I've got a million other things to do. I might have kids to feed, beds to make, showers to take, food to eat. I might have bosses to please. I might have other projects that need attending to. You don't want to waste time. And if you don't address these problems, or if you don't address these questions at the beginning, then you're going to waste a lot of time on the back end with fancy stuff that's never going to get you anywhere.
I like that. So it turns out there's a huge amount of preparation that goes before any kind of presentation engagement.
If you do it right, most of the preparation happens at the beginning.
I like that. I have a feeling that you have more questions to ask before the presentation, and we'll keep them for another episode. Do you have any closing arguments? Anything to wrap up this part?
No, I think that takes care of it until next time.
Great.
So that wraps it up for today, and we will see you again on the next episode.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the insight.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you. Take care. Thank you for listening to The White Rabbit with Matt Krause and Alper Rozanes. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or through your favorite feed.